That's it for the announcements. Without further ado, we can introduce our speaker for today. Our speaker is Dr. David Orenstein. There he is. He is a full professor and department chairperson at Medgar Evers College, and that's in New York, right?
City University. Okay.
He's the author of Godless Grace, How Nonbelievers Are Making the World Safer, Richer, and Kinder. And I believe he has some over there for sale after he's done, or if you just want to ask him questions.
50% off, plus I'll sign it.
All right, awesome.
Yeah. So it's $300 per book.
Nice. He is a national and international speaker on issues related to the free thought movement. He is a primatologist by early training. His current writings can be found on American Atheist Magazine, the Humanist Magazine, and other print and online free thought publications. He also serves as the American Humanist Association's representative to the United Nations, which is very interesting, and I'm hoping maybe you can just tell us a little bit about that,
Sure.
because I, myself included, I don't think we know a lot about what that actually means. He's an activist in several non-belief organizations, and he's a happy and optimistic freethinker who concludes that life is best lived when we are good without God. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Orenstein.
Thank you. Let me start by, first of all, thanking Darren and the board for inviting me. I was actually here back in, I think it was 2012, before the first Reason Rally, when you had Sean Faircloth speak. I don't know if many of you remember that meeting, but I remember it well, and I think I remember some of your faces. So I appreciate the support, of course. And I know Allentown really well, too, because I used to have a girlfriend here. And that relationship didn't work out. But you know, I still find myself going to Mary Ann's Donut Kitchen because it's like the best donuts ever. So on Liberty, right? Yeah. I don't want to like take check my blood or anything like my cholesterol after going there, but that's although the relationship wasn't necessarily fond, that's a fond memory. So and you'll excuse me today because I'm going to assume that this is not blurry. Okay. My 2-year-old got a hold of my glasses about 3 days ago and decided to go, "Oh, Daddy," and wound up breaking them pretty badly. So you don't want to be behind me on 78 going east later, because if you see a car with a Darwin sticker on the back, that's me heading back to New York. I also have 2 daughters. One is starting graduate school, and another one who's going for her bachelor's degree. So I've got a elongated timeline. And when they say, what do they say in The Godfather? Every time I try to go out, they pull me back in. So I'm the happy dad of 3 beautiful daughters, all of whom, at least as they've reached reason, have decided that they too are not believers, at least in the sense of religious belief. They're humanists and they're activists in their own right for women's rights and for other forms of rights. So, I think there's 3 ways that all of us make a difference in the movement. And I was talking about this a little while ago as well. There's like this triad in terms of how you can be an activist. You can either be an activist with your time and plan events and come to things. There's a form of activism where you become a thought person, and then you get to go and speak to people and do things like that. And then the final part of the triangle is where you give money as your main line of support, none of which are necessarily better than the other, because we all do what we can. And so as Paula was saying about all of the agencies that are involved with Syrian refugees, I know that American Atheists, I know that AHA are also involved. And while and this, by the way, is sort of the crux of, sort of to take this intro full circle, why I felt it was so important to write a book like Godless Grace. because we all know, and for several thousand years, and certainly for the last several decades of our lives, that we are conscious individuals, that it seems like the only people who are involved in helping when there is a crisis are those who wear a cross or a Star of David or, have a strong religious belief. And we know that each of us here are carrying healthy, focused, and wanting to help individuals as well. Now, we may not be boots on the ground, but here we are. And for everyone in this room, there are people who are boots on the ground. There are people who are digging wells in Sudan to bring fresh water. There are people who are working for civil and human rights, who are atheists, secularists, non-believers, who are working globally. And the problem is, at least the way I saw it, was that there just wasn't enough information out there. You might have heard some cryptic things, or you might have had some experiential connection to somebody or someone, but not enough is out there. And so the purpose of the book really is to help that conversation go forward, where, okay, we know about Pax Christi, and we know about this group and that group and that group and that group, but guess what? There's also, Freedom from Religion Foundation. There's also Dale McGowan's group. There's AHA. And there are all these groups who are all Doctors Without Borders is not a religious group. The American Red Cross is not a religious group. But we don't talk about them. Or at least we don't actively talk about them, or even know that these groups are out there. So really what I'd like to do is a couple. Let me start by reading from the book and give you an opportunity to hear some of the stories of some of the people who we've profiled. It's really a work of ethnography, and then we'll go into some of the other information. The first person is from Morocco, Qasim el-Ghazali. Qasim el-Ghazali claims to be the first atheist to come out in Morocco. It was a brave act, but Qasim does not see himself so much as being brave, but simply doing what he had to do. When you speak to Qasim, you feel like you are talking to a much older man, not only because of his mature voice, but because he eludes wisdom far beyond his 23 years. Qasim grew up in a Muslim family in a small village in Morocco. He attended public school as a young boy, and his family was not religious. The Quran, according to Qasim, was on the living room table, but never rarely opened. At the age of 8, he questioned his mother, asking, "Where is Allah?" Her eyes moved upwards, and she answered, "Somewhere above us." According to Qasim, adding that Qasim said, "You must be good," this is his mother talking, "you must be good or you will burn in hell." This answer caused Qasim to begin to feel uncomfortable, like a hidden camera was watching him. At the age of 10, his family relocated to Libya because of quote-unquote family troubles, because his family was secular. And his father became very protective because he feared that Qasim would fall under the wrong influence if allowed to play with other children. His father enrolled Qasim in a moderate Quranic after-school program, sort of as cover. And that's where Qasim learned to read the Quran and memorize it. His family returned to Morocco, and as a teenager, he had fallen behind in the Moroccan state school because it was a secular curriculum, and his French wasn't very good. he was forced into an Islamic boarding school, and that's where he entered the world of what he liked to call hardcore Islam, the Saudi Arabian interpretation of religion, as Qasim described it. Students were kept awake sometimes for 3 days in a row, and they were praying from morning till evening. Food was awful, and he could only go and see his family once or twice a month. There is where he was issued his first pair of what he liked to call Taliban pajamas. He was trapped and alone in an extremist world without even a belief in God. After this dark year, he became ill with anemia, and he was sent home. Luckily, Qasim returned, and although he returned and tried to integrate, he was angry and jealous, resenting the other teenagers for wearing more secular clothing after being a year's worth of indoctrination. His father allowed him to remain home and eventually transitioned back to modern life, although it was very difficult. There was a lot of self-hatred. What's wrong with me, he would say. I don't believe in Allah. And then, by some, pardon the expression, miracle, he came across the Universal Declaration of Human Rights put out by the United Nations. And reading that gave him, and this is something that's very interesting in a lot of the people who are profiled, that reading seemed to be one of the most liberating things, whether it was Dawkins or Hitchens or UN documents or anything like that, that having access to information was one of the most critical things that really took people who were either never believed or became non-believers and then activists to really change their life. Qasim now works in Geneva with the Human Rights Council, having been granted political asylum in Switzerland. He works for freedom of thought and freedom of speech. He's a blogger and an author for the Arab world. Atheism is not enough, Qasim said, emphasizing that humanism is what is necessary. It is our moral duty to support each other, to contribute to life, to make a beautiful picture for all the different parts of humanity. Qasim is one of those people who is helping to create, we believe, this beautiful picture. So that's, whoa. Don't stand too close to that. So the genesis of the book was really a way to show how much the movement has grown, but it was also to answer Christopher Hitchens' question. That is, he has said this many times, that, name something that a religious person can do that a non-religious person can't do. Name one thing. Aside from kill in the name of God, rape in the name of God, torture in the name of God, and so on and so forth. Okay? But there are many things that we can do without the need for God. Like build a better society. Like help those in need. Like transform one life, which is a bridge to changing everybody's life. In the name of humanity, not in the name of any spiritual world. And so the book, well, for a few reasons. Let me go. Clearly, we've seen the rise of the nuns. Everyone know what a nun is? Right? Okay. If you look at the statistics and the demographics, which is the second part of the book, there's a whole bunch of ethnography in there about all these people who are helping the world, including former religious people who are now working for like the Clergy Project and things like that. We know that 2/3 of the students who are going to American universities and colleges are not identifying necessarily with any particular religion. They may be identifying as spiritual, whatever that means. And if you go to most of the churches in Europe and with the exclusion of, let's say, some of the Pentecostal churches in the United States, But if you go to many of the, especially I'm in New York, I'm going in all the time, you'll see 3, maybe 4 people sitting in the pews. There's just not that orientation any longer. And it's part of the culture wars in a way. So there's been a rise of activism. I'm going to come closer on this side because I really don't have my glasses. There's more information than ever, and we get our information from just so many different places. Each of you is a source of information. But where are you getting most of your stuff? Well, the internet, websites, blogs, books on the topic. Activists are more involved. Media interest. Like, how cool is it? Well, not how cool is it, but do you all remember when Wolf Blitzer spoke to that young woman whose all the houses around them were bulldozed by a tornado, and he said something like, "Oh, you must have thanked God because you were spared." And she said very subtly, she said, "Well, I'm an atheist," and that was live, My wife, who's from Romania, said what she should have said was, and she's much more of a hardcore. I tend to be the humanist side of atheism. She tends to be the more pitchfork atheist, that's what they call her, which is why I never fight with her either. That what she should have said was, well, if God is so just, why would he knock down all my neighbors' houses? That's what she had hoped the person said. So, we have this confluence now more than ever, okay? Whether it be because of the culture wars, whether it be because of 20 years of involvement of the religious right and, all these religious organizations messing with our politics as a response to that, to sort of swing the pendulum the other way. What we've found a voice. There are fewer people afraid to come out and say, "No, I don't believe in God." And it's hard for a lot of people too. Let's not forget that the reason why a lot of people for years were so afraid to say it was because they were afraid that they were going to lose some aspect of their community. They were going to lose their family. They were going to lose the people who they loved or who loved them. But more and more, as we come out, as we put a face to the movement, it only continues to grow. And I think we all deserve a round of applause for just coming out and being here. I mean, this is a very large group. This is very nice. I've spoken in places where, in like Wisconsin or in smaller places where, 3 or 4 people will come out because they think that there's nobody else like that in there. And they don't want to even tell their husbands or their wives or their family members that they don't believe. But they have this urge, this urgency to be connected to something bigger than they are because they reject the idea of religious spirituality and all of whatever goes along with that in their community. So it's a matter of explanation, right? We're protected by the Constitution. The UN Declaration of Human Rights says many different things about what it means to not be to be free and be religious or not religious, and I'll talk a little about my UN work. I serve on the Freedom of Religion and Belief group, which is an NGO, part of civil society for AHA. That's the primary group, but I also work for Council on the Rights of Children and a couple of other groups as well. And what they try to do, the UN is just really sort of more now than ever opened up to what's called civil society groups like AHA and other NGOs, to be part of the wider discussion, not just the diplomatic discussion, but to say we represent a section or a core of a populace, and on advisement, this is our point of view. For instance, with the atheist bloggers who were murdered in Bangladesh, hacked to death for writing about their non-belief, I wrote AHA's stance, which was given in the last meeting that they had in Geneva about what should be done to follow up and make sure that people are held to account for the senseless and brutal murder of people who just want to share ideas. So that work is ongoing, and it's deeply, deeply important, and it's something that we should all recognize AHA for in terms of its parent, as our parent organization, because they are involved with international, through IHEU primarily, all of the human and civil rights that we sort of on time sometimes take for granted here. They're involved with the good fight, whether it's making sure that intelligent design isn't taught in our public schools, whether it's that someone wants to put a copy of the Ten Commandments in the front lawn of a public building and stuff like that. So there's a legal arm as well. So they work very, very hard, and the UN is just part of that bigger piece. And of course, Camp Quest. If you have children or grandchildren, and you want them to be around secular people for their summer camps and stuff like that, Camp Quest is a great place to go. So the question is, do we really need, and let me ask you, do we need to have a theological doctrine to do good works? Does anyone believe that or accept that? You're amongst friends. You could say yes or no. Or you can say, yes, I believe that at one time. Because based on all the people who we've spoken to, and I just did this to clarify, on every continent, either people are in their indigenous areas, that is where they were born and where they were raised and they're doing the work, or they're going to these places to do the good work, not in the name of God, not in the name of spirituality, but in the name of a common humanity. And with that, I want to read another story, and that's that of Sue Cox, who, if you don't know her, she's from the United Kingdom. So this is Sue Cox's story. When tragedy bears down on a person, it can leave them broken or transformed. But as it turns out, Sue Cox is strong in all the broken places. In 1988, Sue's 19-year-old son, Nicholas, died in a car crash. She was swallowed by grief and wanted to die. When she climbed her way out of the loss, she emerged as an atheist. Sue was raised in a fiercely Catholic home in Lincolnshire, a small seaside town. The impact of Catholicism on Sue was abject fear. This is her quote. I had a sense of being watched by God. Again, here's this thing, whether it's Allah or whether it's a Christian God or a Judeo-Christian God, it's the idea of some oppressive, almost 1984 big brother watching you, watching your every move. She said, she was told to pray to God to offer up her suffering to pay for her sins. During her tween years, a priest moved into her family home, joining her mother, her two spinster aunts, and an ailing father. During those years, the priest sexually abused and raped Sue on multiple occasions. When Sue's mother found out, she did nothing. According to Sue, she didn't even change the sheets. Sue told us that her mother would say, it's all part of God's plan. Shocking, isn't it? At the age of 17, Sue finally ran away from home. She self-harmed. She developed an eating disorder. She drank. She fell into an abusive marriage. She felt like an alien. She felt like vermin. And she felt estranged from the world. At the age of 29, in 1976, with the help of Alcoholics Anonymous, she became sober And as she says, the veils began to lift. 2 years later, she left her husband with 6 children under the age of 12 in tow. So she took the children. She learned to drive. She went back to school and began to trust herself. She began to re-examine her beliefs. Atheism, according to Sue, grew on me. It was an organic process. 25 years ago, she remarried an atheist. Her remaining children and grandchildren are sources of joy and pride for her. She is now actively helping others as a psychotherapist alongside one of her daughters who helps her in her work. Sue considers this work in improving the lives of others to be a privilege and an absolute passion. She's taught 13,000 professionals and counting in the neuroscience of addiction, and has written a book on the topic entitled, Auricular Acupuncture and Addiction. She travels around England and has spoken at 128 maximum security prisons, where she teaches prison officers about the neuroscience of addiction in an effort to improve the quality of life for those who are in prison for life. Britain's prison system is quite compassionate, Sue finds. Having developed a formula that can improve people's lives, she also teaches healthcare workers throughout England's healthcare system. In 2010, Sue traveled from her home in the Midlands to London to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award awarded by the Royal College of Medicine for her work in addiction. This happened to coincide with Pope Benedict's visit to England. 20,000 people congregated in London to protest the Vatican's protection of pedophile priests. And Sue serendipitously found herself on the back of a truck with a microphone, speaking out for the first time about her experience with clergy rape as a youth. Finally, she felt her isolation lift. At the age of 62, she said she felt like part of the human race again. And it was the first time. This experience inspired her to form a charity called Survivor's Voice Europe, which she began as a co-founder with a fellow clergy rape survivor. She began, and his name is Tom Lear, from the Netherlands. Survivor's Voice Europe helps victims become victors by helping people speak out and to heal. In 2014, Sue received an Inspiration Woman Award from the Inspiration Awards for Women for her human rights work. Martin Luther King, she said, our lives begin and end the day we become silent about the things that matter. Through sharing her story, Sue has become empowered, and that has been her labor of love. And now she works to empower others. How does it make you feel? We're all human. We all have emotions. Awesome. Okay. So what did we find in the book? Okay, so I've given you 2. I'll give you 1 more before we're done. I hope you're not bored by these. We found that what really... I don't want to get too close to that again. I've got 1 good ear left now. What we found is this, that people who do this boots-on-the-ground activist work do this work not to become martyrs. No one wants to be Joan of Arc. No one wants to die for their work. They want to live for their work. They want others to live. They do the work because of this intense need to help others who can't help themselves. We also find that this group, and I'm sure many people here, have a very acute understanding of local and geopolitics. This is throughout all of the discussions with all of the activists. There's a high cognition and awareness of time. That is, our lives are finite. If we're lucky, we get 80 years, 90 years. Okay? And then that's it. It's over. But those 90 years should be spent in celebration, not fearing the end, but making the world better while we're here. All of the folks who are saying this. There's a huge amount of empathy towards others. That is not just sympathy, but empathy. That they've walked in those shoes of those who have been victims themselves. And so they can relate directly. There's a strong sense of ethics in right and wrong, holding to account not just the religious, but the non-religious for their actions or inactions. All of this is true, including the fact that nobody is doing this to be the next Mother Teresa. They don't want to be. And this is one of the problems with the people who are activists and why you don't hear about them, because they're doing this almost silently. Whether they took a backpack and decided to go to Africa to help, or they're helping locally in community, people are not out there to make a name for themselves. It's a form of selflessness, not martyrdom. But they don't need to be known for this work, because the work itself is so satisfying. That the motivation is not because I love you, God. It's I love you. And of course, a very strong sense of peace and social justice. That is the work towards peace, to help those in Syria, to help those in Afghanistan, to help those in Allentown, to help those in the barrio of New York City, to help those in the Appalachian Mountains, to help those in Africa, to help where that help is needed. And you see this through all of the research that we've done. These are the sort of the common elements within each of the stories. Oh, and service and participation. The idea that I live to serve. The other thing which is really interesting is that, we all have different names. Some people don't like to be called an atheist. They feel that puts a barrier between people. Because they think of like the angry atheist, and it's like, I was going to say a bad word, but I know there was a little one here, so I'm going to keep it PG, maybe PG-13. So it's, yes, I'm a humanist activist, and I'm proud to be this. Yes, I'm an atheist activist. Yes, I'm a secular activist. Yes, I'm a skeptic. You name it. However they define themselves is how they define themselves. They may or not wear the cloth, if you will, of a particular cuckold, a particular label. But they're doing the work because of their interest to purely help others as secularists. And tied to this, those 8 pillars, is this this emotional motivation to heal the world. There's this Jewish thing called tequila olam.
Tikkun olam.
Thank you. Okay. The idea, it's an ancient idea. And atheism or non-belief is almost as old, as an anthropologist, I know this. I also teach comparative religion. Unbiasedly, mind you. The idea that these concepts, while some of them may be founded in faith, they are not exclusive to faith, because you have, going back to the animist philosophers more than 2,000 years ago, and even further, the idea, the questioning of that there is no God. So you can almost make the claim that once we enter the world of archaeology, that is, when we start to write things down, before that it's paleontology. We enter into archaeology when we start to have the written record of humanity. That just as equal as you've got the Code of Hammurabi and all these Assyrian tablets and stuff like that, which are mostly commerce, but there's God King stuff in there. You also have people questioning whether or not the God King is really a god. We know he's a king, but where's God? And fast forward 5,000 years, it's clear that with all the controversies around the world related to religion and civil war, that not much has changed in 5,000 years. And we can thank religion for that. Okay, that's my bias. There's this core motivation to make it right. That is to take what is unjust and make it just. Again, this idea of service for others. The idea to seek justice, what it is legal justice, what it is the right for a child to get an education, what it is a right for a woman to not be put into a brutal marriage for some clan reason, whether it is the right to receive health care. These are all the things that these activists are working on. And of course, we have environmental activists as well. That is, if you're going to heal the world, that it's not just us who are sitting on top of it. This big, what do they say? Like, chewy center, hard crust on the outside, chewy center in the middle. Our planet Earth. Okay, anyone see the Academy Awards? Anyone hear Leonardo DiCaprio talk about environmentalism? He's coming out. Here's this guy, right? Just won the Academy Award, and it was almost like a throwback to when Marlon Brando won the award, and he sent that Native American up to receive it. There's a way to talk about social justice. When he took the award, and he went on to a diatribe about how global warming, whether we think it is human-caused or not, is real, and that we should be aware of it. So there's this whole idea of healing the world, which is bubbling up, which is coming out in all these different ways now. Education is a very big piece of the puzzle for most of the people who we've spoken to. Again, a lot of readers. They've read Hitchens, they've read Why I'm Not a Christian, or they've read Dawkins, or they've read Carl Sagan, who's one of my favorites, and have, so they don't have necessarily a Bible in hand to say John 3:16 or something like that, but they'll have a copy of The Demon-Haunted World, or they'll have a copy of Why God is Not Great, and they'll be able to quote chapter and verse from that. Okay, but it's more of a well-rounded education. That is, it's not just an atheist or humanist education. It's one that focuses, which is received and then given back. Strong need to protect others. Again, without trying to belabor the fact, the idea of, like in Sue's situation, where she was raped repeatedly by this one priest over her teenage years. And then, as she became conscious and ready and able to take action herself, to then go out there and do things like educate, help those who might be hurting things, to help the planet, to seek justice, to serve others, to make it right and to heal the world. It's like sort of an hourglass, if you will, but it's upside down. The other thing, for those who are very involved in protecting the rights, not just of human rights and basic human rights, but a lot of the folks who are involved to make sure that non-believers, whatever we call ourselves, have the same and equal rights. And this gets back to justice. And again, we'll relate further back up here to protect, to educate, to help, so that we can gather, that we don't have to be offended by going to a public school and seeing a cross on the wall, or that a teacher isn't just given a pass because he starts saying that the world is 6,000 years old in biology class, or we don't have the 10 Commandments on our lawns. Well, on your lawn you can have it because it's your private property, but in front of the courthouse door, or a woman's right to choose is maintained, right? Think about what happens in the next go-round in terms of U.S. political. I'm not going to talk about my personal preferences, but in a sense, the president is almost, the next president is almost guaranteed to be able to put 1, 2, maybe 3 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court. What does that mean for the rights of women, for the rights of children? The other thing in terms of experience is to provide a safe haven. So these are all really positives. We're almost universal. There's concern, although most of the people do work with these other organizations. You know, you've got World Vision, Pax Christi, the Salvation Army, Muslim charities. These are just a few of the ones that are working locally and globally to put their brand on saving human lives. What the activists in this book, and so many more who aren't in the book, are doing is putting our brand. It's a fight for market share, if you will, in some cases. And this was something from Jomo Kenyatta, who said, when missionaries arrived, the Africans had the land and the missionaries had the Bible. They taught us to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened them, they had the land and we had the Bible. And I think it's very astute, because for many, many decades, for many, many centuries, this love for humanity came with the idea of, oh yeah, and you'll forget about your culture, you'll forget about your linguistics, you'll forget about your history, you'll forget about your native religion, you'll forget about all these things, and you'll accept whatever, because we love you and we want to save you, we want to save your soul. Those are acts of imperialism, pure and simple. Imperialism of thought, imperialism of stealing people's lives, moving people, right, from their native, strike two. Okay. And again, reading is very important. I'll read that from Bertrand Russell. So far as I can remember, there is not a word in the Gospels in praise of intelligence. Bertrand Russell. So here they are reading people like Darwin, like Christopher Hitchens, like Jerry Coyne, who's a friend, Neil deGrasse Tyson. And this reading is very, very liberating, because what it does is it says that you don't owe your life to some spirit deity that maybe your parents believed in or maybe your clan believed in, but the world is much bigger than your little God. The universe is much bigger than your little beliefs, even though you think that they're really big beliefs. Of course, there's a strong idea of accepting science and rational consequences. That is, if we if we know that we help, that we know that we can change the world. Conversely, we know that if we don't help, the world will not heal. And every one of the 30 or 35 people we've actually spoken to said that there is this incredible urge to make the world better. The idea of time is finite, our time is finite, and that this is the time that we have to do this shit, the stuff that we can do, the activist work that we can do to heal the world, to make it better. And let me just read you Leo's story. Do I have time for one more? Is it okay? Leo Igwe, one of 5 children, was born in a village in southwest Nigeria to Catholic parents. His father was headmaster at a local Catholic primary school, and his mother took care of the family, having attended less than 2 years of school. Leo was not a privileged child, but he was groomed to devote his life to activism, and was certainly not groomed to be an atheist. He was sent to seminary at the age of 12 to get an education. After 9 years, he read Bertrand Russell's essay, Why I'm Not a Christian, which began a 3-year process of rethinking his views on religion that eventually resulted in his departure from the seminary and started a life of as a humanitarian atheist. His family thought it was a phase, that he'd quickly outgrow his humanism as I'm paraphrasing a little bit just to go through, as he faced the real world, and would discover that it would be impossible to change the world without Christ. He was 24 years old. His father told his mother, let the boy hit his head against the wall a few times. He'll see. But even Leo's parents misjudged his conviction. Now he's 44, and he's still undaunted. He puts one foot in front of the other, and he is unstoppable. Sometimes he's astonished by his own results. In 2010, he received a letter from an Australian freethought community that was requesting that he embark on a speaking tour across Australia and New Zealand. A speaking tour, he thought, what is a speaking tour? Who would want to hear me speak about what? English is my second language. I'm not even good looking. He was nervous when he got the letter. But Leo did have many things to say. He spoke about when he traveled to Malawi and slowly coaxed atheist activist George Thindwa, who was also, not in the book, but also an activist, to courageously expose the unlawful imprisonment of 50 women who had been accused of being witches. We think that we are beyond some of these things, but humans, if we are nothing else, we are pattern-seeking primates, which is why I think religion has such a strong hold on us still. They were eventually all released from jail. His work against what he described as harmful traditional beliefs like ritual killings and other atrocities. Leo chips away at the irrationality of that thinking and many other beliefs like that. He raises money to support and rescue the orphans of the women who have been killed or maimed by witch hunters, orphans who have been abandoned and deemed untouchable because locals are afraid of being drawn into, this is his quote, the devil's world. Leo also speaks against the caste system because, as he explains it, the people born into lower castes have no hope of rising above virtual slavery. He's also working on the acceptance of gay marriage. Could you imagine in the middle of Africa working on these things where, you know, if you're a non-believer, you get hacked to death. If you're gay or lesbian, you get hacked to death. Even if they think you are and you don't admit it, they'll still hack you to death. Here's this guy being brave enough to go out there and put his own life on the line. Okay, this is not writing a blog somewhere. This is somebody who could wake up, pardon the expression, wake up dead, simply because of his political activism. Okay. Well, I'll finish with Leo there. There's more to that story, but it's much longer. But he's also working. There are some communities in Africa where he's working where it's not just witches. It's the idea of other types of magic. For instance, and he talks about this in the book, that the brutal murder of people who are hunchbacks, because the belief that in the fact that they're hunched, that there's some magical power within that hunch, and that if you can get it out, you can get supernatural powers. So this is what he's fighting against. It doesn't have to be called God. It doesn't have to be called any of the gods who we understand. It could just be magic. It can be all of these things that relate to magical thinking. Or is there a virgin in the room? Maybe we can sacrifice a virgin to the computer. Well, this is Allentown, so there probably aren't any virgins. Sorry, I had to. All right. Okay. So part 2 of the book is really less about the ethnographic and more about where the movement is going, where it stands, that non-belief, I believe, or I accept as true, is the next civil rights movement. And as we've had the women's movement, which has had fits and starts, we've had the movement for civil rights, for voting rights, that we're at a point now, and now we're coming up on the Second Reason rally, this political consciousness that we're strongly developing now is the next political movement. We are part of this next political movement. And finally, where I didn't expect the book to lead me as one of the authors, as the originator of the book, is to what I'm doing now, which is I'm still speaking about the book, but what I've done is I've created a nonprofit foundation. It's called Godless Grace Foundation, where that's strike 4. What we're doing now is we're connecting people who want to do good works in the name of non-faith or non-belief with people who want to, you remember I talked about that triangle, and one of the parts of the triad was just be able to give money because you don't have the time or whatever. So what we're doing now is we're raising money, and we've been able to actually give money to different groups and different individuals to go out there now and change the world for the better through the foundation. And they've done some really interesting things. We've given money to Inoshenko from Femin. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but look it up. It's really good. A lot of other groups. We've got a Philippine group that, if you know anything about the Philippines, which is like 90% Catholic or 85% Catholic, like Catholic with a capital C. I've been there. It's very scary because there's abject poverty everywhere, and most of it is because the Catholic Church has such a hold on the psyche of the people that you won't find any contraception or anything like that, and they actively fight the government. The church does to stop any form of family planning or contraception or anything like that. That's the devil's work. Really, very scary. So we have a Philippine group that is made up of atheists and humanists who are going into basically, if you go to the slums of the Philippines, which once you leave Manila, all of the Philippines, at least the main island, is slum. There's a UN Superfund site where you have almost the Grand Canyon size of just trash, refuse. And not only is it just there, but people have, because of the high density, because no one's using contraception, have literally made towns into the trash. That is, their homes are made of trash. Their livelihoods are spent digging through the trash to sell other people who are in abject poverty the trash. the great God, huh? So what the foundation does is it connects people who want to give money to people who do have the time, effort, and energy. It's sort of a form of microfinance. Never in my life did I think that I'd be doing this as the next phase of my own activism. But we've been able to raise thousands of dollars at this point, and we've also been able to give that money back. That is, we keep very little for administrative costs, just a little bit for running the website and for having a space, literally just a mailbox in New York, so we can say we have a New York City nonprofit. But the rest of it literally goes back in. A little bit goes into an endowment, so we don't have to necessarily just rely on money being given by people from around the world. So then we can be self-sufficient. So that is really, in my own journey as an atheist activist, is where this is taking me now as chairperson of this foundation. And, you know, little by little, Rome wasn't built in a day. And if you need to contact me or want to contact me, please do. And I guess I'll take questions.
We're going to use the microphone this time.
Oh, okay.
There we go. All right, we're short on time, so we're just going to take a few questions, and then David will be at the desk if anyone has questions for him after that. And
I'll be at the bar.
All right, so let's go with the first question here. Excuse me, I don't want to...
What's that?
Test.
Dave, I want to humbly suggest a theme for your next book.
Okay.
Because this is a discussion of improving or making the world better by adding good. Okay? If you watch the Academy Awards, you watched Spotlight, where a newspaper was involved in holding a diocese accountable. Our business is serving newspapers. We like to think that we're not adding good, but that we're subtracting bad, which makes the world a better place. And I'd like to see a book that discusses all the people who go around trying to hold the powerful accountable, most of whom I would suspect are not good.
It's a very good point. I think that there are a lot of people who may be doing that. It's funny you mentioned the next book. I am writing my next book, but it's not in this area at all. It's actually on the life and times of Charles Darwin. But from the idea of, it's called Darwin's Apostles. It's about the people who surrounded Darwin, because Darwin himself was like insanely afraid to talk about, even though he wrote The Origin of Species, was insanely insecure about debating it. So if it wasn't for about 5 or 6 people who really informed his circle, who knows where we'd be with natural selection, and then of course biology and all these other things that have come out of understanding natural selection. But I take your point. I mean, some of the people who are doing this activism, they are in a sense they're doing the work trying to build bridges, and some of them do, because we have to be realist in a way, do work with non-secular agencies, because those secular agencies are already so embedded in the areas that there's no other venue or way in. So you go where you can do the most good, and I agree. The positivity here is not to necessarily hold individuals or institutions to account, because that's important, but it's the immediate relief of suffering that these folks are trying to do. And that was what we wanted to do in the book, is talk about the idea of what non-believers are doing to really make the world safer, richer, and kinder. But I take your point. That's very good.
But don't you think all the Catholics who believe they're doing good?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's really important to get at the people who are doing bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
No,
One more?
well taken point.
One more.
Yeah.
When I think of a book that I read by Mortimer Adler, whom I'm sure you've heard of,
Yes.
he talked about, a quote was that argumentation in a society is impossible without partisanship. And I tend to think, looking at it, that maybe religion is just the outgrowth of the partisanship. When I consider atheists, some people call me one. It doesn't offend me either way.
Right.
Whatever, it's a different idea. So often I find the same thing that my father found when looking at an atheist, Madeline O'Hare, her name was, in the 50s or so.
Yeah.
It's almost like the word atheist being a without theism, God. Really, atheists so often, and this is what I think people are turned off by, is that they're not that. They're not atheists. They're anti-theists.
Right.
So all the stuff you're talking about, the good words, I love it. And
Thank
then,
you.
then I wonder, oh, yeah, I mean, and like I say, my views on God, a lot of people call me atheist, but I'm not, but it's a different thing. It's a longer discussion.
Right.
And it seems to me that, where it's these myths that people make up, if people are doing good, I really don't care. And then I see it seems like a very difficult, hard sell to sell something on we're just not that. And Jews have this where we're just anti-Semitism, and this is where I see such a dilemma in making a movement of this, because what is the ultimate thing unifying? And I find this in atheists such as Christopher Hitchens. I mean, it's bitterness, maybe with the possible exception of Sam Harris, but it's hard for something upon which to grab when there's no closed form on which people to say we believe, and this is where I find a difference.
To answer you, I would have to say this, that the important thing is to have as many voices as possible in the movement. So you might have the more angry atheists on one spectrum of the Likert scale. You might have the humanist on this side. And understand that there's a range of a reaction to those things. The thing that I think so worries people who are activists, from David Silverman, who's the current president of American Atheist, to people who are boots on the ground, is they don't want other people to define who they are by somebody else's values and morality and ideas of what a non-believer is.
Yeah,
And so that is incredibly important. And I think no one here wants to be defined by the religious right as, baby killers, right? Although we're, for 20, 25 years, if you said the word atheist, even now in American politics in this election cycle, you get the disparity where, and look at the Pew research that says, who would you vote for president? And you find, arsonist, baby killer, whatever, atheist. After all,
I would
those
disagree
things.
with you if I can just jump in.
Sure.
I think that some people want that,
Right.
and I mean, I'm thinking of interviews of some Muslim women. Not that I think this is a good life. They're comfortable being told this is your niche. Not that I like that, but then I think many people in religion, it gives up what they want to give up, and then they can, it's kind of like,
Well, if you only
pets.
if you only
They rely on
educate
others.
if you only educate within a particular doctrine, you close off all the other opportunities to learn other doctrines, whether it be other religious doctrines or whether it be secular doctrines. And you see what happens is no religion wants to be held accountable for its ideas and beliefs, right? Because that, you're either told accepted it on faith, right? It's like, of course, there's, you can go into a million examples, but, and you can say, well, how could you believe this? How can you believe that? In the end, it comes down to, you got to take it on faith.
All right, and with that, we're going to have to cut it there. We're way over on time.
Oops.
I'm sure they've got the table for us for those who are staying for lunch downstairs. If you're staying for lunch, I think we're up on the mezzanine, so if you go down to the first floor, then walk all the way to the back and go up the stairs. I think we're on the mezzanine, unless they've changed it since I was down there. So thank you again to David.
Thank you. Thank you very
to
much.
Paula. Thank you to the crew in the back. Thank you to the
Thank
coffee
you.
people. And we'll see you next time or at lunch. Thanks for coming
Okay.
out.
Thank you.